Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for being here for today's presentation. I know typically we're in the office, but with the new times we're all facing, thank you to everyone who was able to attend, but also to our participants who were willing to do this as a panel discussion. We know it's a hot topic and we didn't want to have to wait until we got back in the office in order to present it. So thank you to Kevin, Carol, and Paul for being willing to do this on this platform. I'm sure by now we've all been on several Zoom calls. Just a few reminders, everybody is muted, so you do have the ability to unmute yourselves, but we do ask that any questions that you have, please submit them through the chat feature. What we're going to do is Stephanie Allgeyer, who is our moderator today on the panel, she's going to go through some questions that we received prior to the presentation, and then we're going to go through and address the questions that we have within the chat feature. So please feel free to send those on to me. Like I said, they'll come straight to me. I'll get them over to Stephanie and then we'll get them addressed. We are also recording the session, so if anybody has to jump off or has a colleague or someone who is not able to join us and we need to share it, we are more than happy to do so. So in the interest of time, I'm gonna go ahead and kick it over to Stephanie Allgeyer.
Thanks, Katie. Welcome everybody, and as Katie mentioned, obviously it's a little bit different of a format. Typically I start off with saying welcome to Von Lehman, but welcome to my kids' toy room instead. You know, I really appreciate everybody still taking the time as we're all operating in a different world these days. So, you know, it's nice sometimes to be able to talk about some different things, but today it's all about development departments and the structuring of departments and everything along those lines and where, you know, we'll be focusing on a little bit of how things were in the past. We are going to touch a little bit on what we're doing now in light of recent events and how COVID-19 has affected some of those development department things. But you know, I'm going to let each of the panelists introduce themselves. But again, at Von Lehman, we are thrilled. This is our second installment of the Covington Business Council nonprofit quarterly lunch and learns. We're happy to be partnerships with them. So far, all of the events have been well attended, and we like to make sure that each of the programs are beneficial to everybody. So we're hoping this one is the same as well. But again, my name is Stephanie Allgeyer, and I oversee the nonprofit services group within Von Lehman and Company. So I'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves because they can probably do it better justice than I can. But we'll start off with Paul.
Hi everybody, great to be here. I am Paul Miller. I am currently the Donor Relations Director at Family Nurturing Center. We have offices both in Florence and in Cincinnati. Just real quick, I spent 30 years in the corporate world with the same company. 12 years ago, I left that to start working in nonprofit, and just because of working on boards and knowing people, have been a few places since then, but at Family Nurturing Center now, so great to be here and great to see everybody.
Carol?
Hi, Carol Serrone, and I'm the Chief Philanthropy Officer at Redwood School and Rehabilitation Center in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. I started my career actually in accounting. I like Von Lehman. I was at Barnes Denig and led their tax practice for a while, worked at a couple other places. I've worked with several nonprofits, and then right after tax season in 2014, April 16th of 2014, I moved into a philanthropy position.
Kevin?
Hi, my name is Kevin Reynolds. I serve as the Vice President for Institutional Advancement at Thomas More University. I've been here about 6 years, will be 6 years in July. I came to the institution to be the Dean of Students 5 or 6 years ago and transitioned to advancement work in 2018. So relatively new, but I'm a quick study. And you know, the first thing that I was tasked with doing was rebuilding this department. So we're a staff of 11 and I've hired 10 of them. So it's a very new department. And so I'm hoping that some of the successes and the mistakes that we've engaged in over the last couple of years as we've been rebuilding might be interesting to this group. So I'm happy to be here and glad to see some familiar faces, and I think even a couple Thomas More alums in the group. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kevin. And Kevin kind of touched on basically our first topic, which is, and maybe not right now as we're under everything with COVID-19, but let's talk about before all of this started. If each of you could just touch on briefly, the size of your department, how it operates, that type of thing, and we'll go through some additional questions after that. But Kevin, if you want to just elaborate a little bit more on what you started to say a little bit.
Sure. So our department, as I mentioned, is 11 people. We're responsible for all of the development efforts for the university and marketing and communication. So we have staff that are engaged in alumni relations, event planning, advancement services, and prospect research. And then I have a major gift officer, which we identify as someone who manages a portfolio of 40 to 60 individuals, depending on the year, that are capable of making a $25,000 gift over a 3-year period or higher. That person is also responsible for planned giving and corporate engagement. Her name is Denise Carl, and she actually attends a lot of the CBC events, and so you might get to know her quite a bit. And then I have a director of communications and public relations, a digital communications manager who mostly does websites, social media, and a graphic design person. So all in all, 11 staff, probably 3 frontline fundraisers, 2 prospect research people, and mostly communication and alumni engagement beyond that.
Thank you. Carol?
So at Redwood, we have, I started in January of 2018, and we've also had some changes since I've been there. But so I head up a team of 6. We have 3 full-time people. So I'm full-time. I have a special event coordinator who works full-time and a volunteer coordinator who works full-time. And then our department also does communications, marketing. And so we have a part-time communication coordinator who's actually Andy Furman. So in his prior life to radio, he actually was a PR marketing guy. And so now he does part-time radio, part-time PR marketing for Redwood. And then I have a part-time grant writer as well as an intern from the University of Cincinnati who is working with special events and our PR marketing and does all our social media. I think that's everybody.
Great. Paul?
Well, right now I am a department of 1. We did have it split between 2 people, the relations and fundraising side, and then someone was doing marketing and special events. That person left. Unfortunately, the timing was right before everything happened with COVID, and then when we had a little staff and things became a little uncertain as far as events, we haven't hired that position back yet. So I am doing it all right now. We're doing the grant writing, doing the fundraising, trying to figure out the special events. We do have a really great board and a marketing committee on the board who do really good work in taking that marketing piece on for me. So that's worked out really well.
Okay, great. So as you can tell, the great thing about this panel is that each and every one of them has a different size of development staff. And that was one thing that we were very interested in having so that we can provide everybody that's on this call right now with the ability to see how things operate depending on the size of the organization. So, from 1 all the way up to 11. And I think each of you has really operated in a space where you may have been 1 at one time as well in some other places as well. So, definitely want to draw upon those things as well. So, just to start off with the possibility of the department of 1, if you, have been in that realm before, or have ideas on regarding being a department of 1 where everything kind of falls on your shoulder, if you could talk a little bit about engagement throughout your organization. Who else do you engage throughout the organization, whether it be executive directors or board members or anybody else, to help you out within your function of development so that you don't feel like everything is falling on you and you have time to really get things done? So Carol, do you want to start us off with that engagement discussion?
Sure. So I've actually been on boards which had a staff of 0 for development. So I've been obviously working with them from the standpoint of a lot of the board members were actually the people who helped with development activities. And my first job when I left public accounting was I was a person of one, but I did hire a part-time grant writer. So I think the most important thing is when you're definitely in office of one, the close relationship, because usually they've been trying to do something before they hired you. So the executive director is somebody who wore a lot of hats, and so they're very engaged, as well as a lot of the board members. So I think leveraging not only the people who are in the volunteer leadership as well as the leadership of the organization, but I also find that the program staff are sometimes our best engagement ambassadors in the philanthropy world as well. So I think you just really, especially in the smaller organizations, it's like everyone pulls together when it comes to the philanthropy efforts of the organization.
So what type of aspects of that engagement would you kind of pass off to them for them to
definitely. So one of the things, staff hour wise, the least return on investment is special events, but it's also the best way to engage people in the community to learn about your organization, as well as brand awareness through media follow-ups and promotion. So I think a lot of leveraging I've used in the past has come through putting together special event committees, but also you'll find a lot of people we've used. I've been a board member who's been a grant writer. We've also had volunteers help with grant writing. So I think those are the two biggest areas that I've relied on others that aren't actually employed by the organization.
Okay, great. Paul?
I get great help from everybody here. So Jane Herms is our executive director, and Jane's been here for over 25 years. So when I need any kind of knowledge for anything as far as grant writing, as far as connecting with the donor, she knows. Our program director helps me out tremendously when I need to have data for grants, or if I want to put out some messaging where we want to talk about what we're doing in our programs, but we need to be a little bit delicate with the messaging. She does a great job with that. My accountant, when I need to do the financials for grants, just takes a great weight off of me, because I can do the numbers, but anybody that does grant writing knows everybody wants numbers in a different way. So that's a great help as well. So, and the board, we've got a really active board, and they're very engaged, and I can reach out to them for just about anything. So yeah, I get great support from everybody at the organization.
Kevin, anything to add?
Yeah, I would make a couple comments. I would echo the other panelists on the importance of volunteers in the board. I see my friend Barry Henry's on the call today. He and I serve on Covington Latin School's board. I chair their advancement committee. They have one person who's responsible for both admissions and advancement at Covington Latin. And so I try to, with some of the folks in the advancement committee, shoulder a lot of the advancement strategies, or even making asks on behalf of the president or the headmaster there in that instance, and then the advancement director. So I think the importance of board and volunteers is key for small shop operations. I would also say that when we were at a period of transition, when it was really me and a graphic designer that were running our operation here at the university, prioritizing your time is one of the most important things that you can do. And one of the ways that we were able to prioritize our time was with really quality prospect research that we had the opportunity to get some software to help us measure. So what we know about development work is to qualify donors, you want to make sure you have folks, you understand their capacity, their affinity, and their philanthropy. Well, you might be able to control their affinity with some of these events and things, but you have one lunch a day, 7 lunches a week, right, that you can spend on helping someone grow their affinity. How do you know who to sit down with? Well, there are softwares available that you can help you find individuals' potential capacity and their philanthropic tendencies with other institutions or other not-profits. So I think spending time with the right people is one way to be most successful as a small shop operation.
And if I could echo a little bit, Stephanie, on what Kevin said, really, especially in a one shop, you can't do everything well. So you really have to focus on those few things that you want to do well. One big thing that I noticed, as far as plan and giving, that's something that everybody wants, but a plan and giving program is something that's difficult to maintain if you don't have somebody running it. So that's one of those things where you want to put something out there that, plan and giving is available, but you can't focus all your time on that when you're trying to connect with major donors and write grants and run events. So just focusing on those things that you can do and do well, and then knowing that some of the stuff you need to have touches on, you're not going to be able to put full attention behind it.
And I just want to share one thing too, especially when I was on the board and we had no philanthropy person on, or when I was my own one-stop shop person. The Hamilton County Library has a great person that his name is Kent, who is their grants, he's their grants resource librarian, and they have the foundation search so that you can go there and like search foundations, because we have a big enough budget now that I have that subscription, but when I didn't have that subscription, working with other nonprofits, I could go to the Hamilton County Library, and I'm sure the Kenton County Library has it as well, but I know through the Association of Fundraising Professionals, Kent comes about once a year to kind of do like a grant research class. And he's actually doing some, they've let you, it used to be you'd have to actually go in the library, but right now because of COVID, they let you kind of access that software virtually, and he can also virtually help you with some searches and things. So I think that's a great resource too, if you don't have a really deep bench to pay for that kind of subscription.
Very much agree.
Yep, for sure.
Great. Okay. Kevin, you talked a little bit about time, and obviously if, there's so much time that there isn't a day, and being a one-man shop versus being a large organization, and maybe not, there still is that time component in the concept of having to be actually strategic in your approach to having the development department and what you're going to do. Interested to see if each of you has a development plan that you work through, and maybe the components of that, or how often you may, change things that are within the plan, or, because a lot of boards do the strategic plan, just at the board level, but if that has trickled down to the development area for its own strategic plan as well. Kevin, do you want to start us off with that?
Yeah, we do. But we're in the process of changing it based on a lot of the research that we're doing. So the best way I used to sort of start answering that question is we're doing a deep dive into our data. So I'm blessed to have a really high quality advancement services person who's helping me find some key metrics, such as taking our donor retention rate, which for us is about 65%, and figuring out if we were to raise that by an additional 5%, what would it take to do that? One of the things we've done is we've taken out our outlier major gifts and looking at our annual fund, seeing the median gift over a 3-year period to help us figure out how many gifts at which level do we need to successfully secure in order to hit our goals. And if we know that we need, say, 100 gifts that are more than $1,000 a year, we know that we need to identify 300 prospects who are capable of making a gift at that level. And so that gets into, again, prioritizing your time and your data so that you're going after the right people to be most successful. So we're doing a lot of deep dive into our data to figure out how to develop that plan to be more intentional with our time and sort of more sophisticated in our approach. But I do think that having a plan year to year is key for managing your resources, which is your time and your budget.
Great. Paul?
We have a plan. Actually, we just had a development committee meeting last week. We just developed a plan at the end of 2019. And quite frankly, what we talked about last Friday was what do we need to do to pivot away from some of that plan, because things have changed tremendously since the advent of COVID-19. Part of our plan was to get more people into our building and more tours and more people into this. Actually, the Cincinnati office mainly because they can actually see what goes on there daily with our foster kids and how we work with them. That's not going to happen anytime soon now. So, quite frankly, I don't know what the future holds there. I think the biggest thing is, in this time anyway, is to be able to react quickly to what's going on and just keep a wide open mind on because I don't know what's going to happen next month or 6 months down the road. Particularly, this may be a question on the agenda, but we're talking about fundraisers. I mean, our fundraiser is going to be coming up in August, and there's some better thing. In fact, I'm almost positive it's not going to come off. I just don't think people are going to be ready to get in a crowd of 350 people by August. I know other organizations that have already canceled or repositioned their fundraisers doing online virtual events. So yeah, we have a plan. Most of the plan is still solid and good, and we're working it, but lots will change over the next few months and year, I think.
Carol?
We definitely have a plan, and we kind of have an integrated philanthropy plan because we have a foundation as well as our operation of Redwood. So we have a Redwood Foundation. And so we kind of integrate our philanthropy activities with both of those. And we have a steering committee made up from some board members on both the operating board and the foundation board. And actually, we just met to finalize our plan on May 1st because our fiscal year ends June 30th. So at the May board meetings for both organizations, they have to approve our plan. So we've just been looking at that, and we've been kind of refocusing a little bit, especially because of COVID. We have our largest fundraising event the first Friday in March, which was probably the last big fundraising event in this season. So blessed in a way that we got that done because people were canceling, and we actually had hand sanitizers in each spot at the table. We had 600 people at Paul Brown Stadium. And so we raised a lot more money than was budgeted, but we've also had to cancel our May fundraising event, which usually is tied to the Kentucky Derby, and it's a night at the races. So it was interesting because the Redwood board president was looking at our budget for next year, and she's like, well, if you made so much money at the Express in March, you know, why is your budget so low? I think our budget was to make 85 and we made like 140. So I said, because look, we're not having our May event. So you can't count on making that same amount of money every time. And so the fact that we kind of really did a great job at the one means that I don't have to change my May event to a virtual event because we're still meeting our budgetary goals for June 30th without having that other event because we did so great on this. But we're really refocusing. We just focus on 4 special events because it does take so much volunteer as well as staff time, and trying to transition some of them because we're celebrating our 67th birthday tomorrow. And so a lot of our donors have kind of, aged. And so they're like, well, we need to have another young event professionals event. And we're like, why can't we turn one of our kind of old traditional events into something fun? So we kind of have a live band. We moved to Paul Brown Stadium, engaging. We went from about 275 people to 600 people. And so we're just looking at ways to refresh events that have been around for a long time. The other thing that we're looking at is our major gift level is, we call a $5,000 gift a major gift. But we're actually using a team from just the board and the foundation, and we're calling it more asset-based philanthropy because especially right now, people might have appreciated stock and they might be getting a low dividend and they might want to make a charitable trust or something. So they might want to use assets instead of income because a lot of people don't have a lot of extra income. So we're kind of looking at a more asset-based philanthropy approach for major gifts as well as plan giving together. So we have some attorneys that work with us as well. And then we have, traditional annual campaign and things like that. One thing we do know is we are doing a deep dive into our donor database. We just switched, we were at Razor's Edge, we just moved to Salesforce. But one of the things we know is we have a great annual fund base. We make and a lot of long-term donors, but no one's ever asked them to kind of move up the thing. So we're really focusing on how better to engage our donors, maybe ask them for the gift that's not a recurring gift. Maybe it's a once in a lifetime gift, maybe it's a once every several year gift, but so we're really focusing on that in the next fiscal period. And one of the other things is we do a lot with our grant writer, because we're in a building that was built in the 60s and some of our classrooms haven't been renovated for 30 years. So we have a lot of we have roofs, like two parts of it, we have 6 roofs, 2 roofs cost $250,000. So so that's a total another story of things. So we've really gotten a maintenance person and our CFO, and we've kind of looked at where we have required maintenance and where we need to generate cash reserves and where we need to write grants for. So we have our grant writers goal has a percentage of grants to help operationally, because we do have a difference between what we can charge fee for service and what we need for, therapy services, nursing services, and things like that, as well as what we need on campus for our facility. So yeah, so we have a lot of different moving parts, but it's integrated between our foundation. And I don't know if, I'm sure some people are aware, but we're focused right now in the short term. So starting next week, we're going to be engaging our donors with the Endowed Kentucky Tax Credit, because we opened a Redwood fund at Greater Cincinnati Foundation, and we also have one at Horizon Community Funds. And there's no minimum, but we know that especially with something like COVID, for our long-term stability, we need to really focus on the foundation. And this way you get a tax credit for making a donation to an endowed fund. And so, so we're kind of expanding our endowment per se to also be housed, not just in our own 501c3 foundation, but also at the community foundation. So lots of things in our plan.
That's a lot of things, yeah. And there's a couple things that I think we want to circle back on for sure, especially as we start to talk about maybe some transitions that we've made as a result of where we are today under COVID-19 and everything. But one of the things I want to talk about right now is a lot of you mentioned data, and a lot of what you're doing is based on your data. So, and data is only good as probably what you're putting in versus what you're getting out and what you're utilizing it for, and making sure that what you're putting in is actually going to be useful on the back end for what you want to accomplish. Carol, you mentioned Redwood is using Salesforce, and I was wondering if everybody could talk about what platform they may be on, why they decided on that platform, and how they may be utilizing that. So Carol, do you want to start off and expand on your use of Salesforce?
Yeah, so it's an interesting transition that we just went through. So we were using Razor's Edge, and I kind of feel like we weren't really using it to the extent it needed to be, and they were upgrading it, and it was going to cost us like an extra $9,000 a year to stay on it. And I didn't feel like we had people trained on it enough and that kind of thing. And due to some other software issues that we have going on, we were able to apply to, so Salesforce has a salesforce.org piece, and they actually, you can get like 10 licenses for pro bono. And we also got a pro bono project to migrate all our data. So, so it was a very cost effective, but much more user-friendly way for my team to use our data, because we only had 2 licenses on Razor's Edge, and it was just crazy. And we have this, and one of the things is we had a data entry person, and for some reason, about 1.5 years ago, when we were doing a little bit of consolidating jobs, she left. So a lot of other people who that wasn't their main job was trying to maintain Razor's Edge. So, but now we have a whole volunteer management piece. So about 6 months ago, we hired someone to do volunteer management. So we get that for free with our Salesforce. So for us, it was very cost effective because we saved about $9,000, and we got a lot more kind kind of user-friendly data with Salesforce. So anyone who's a small shop, feel free to go to salesforce.org and apply, because, you know, that's a great opportunity for you to have a good donor data management software.
Great. Kevin, what are you guys using over at Thomas More?
We have a CRM that's called Bloomerang, Bloomerang, right? So, and I have described Bloomerang as if Razor's Edge is a Rolls Royce, Bloomerang is like a Toyota Camry. It gets you where you need to go. It is best described as fine. I think that we enjoy Bloomerang. There are a lot of bells and whistles that Razor's Edge has that we would love to have, but we just can't afford. So Bloomerang does a lot of different things. I would say, though, it is incredibly intuitive. So if you can use Facebook, you can use Bloomerang. And so that's something that our team has really benefited from. We like it.
Great. Paul?
That's funny. So we actually just transitioned to Bloomerang the 1st of May, Kevin. We had eTapestry, which is another Blackbaud product. It was, I don't even know how to explain it. So trying to get a report out of eTapestry was painful. Bloomerang is, like you said, it's so much more intuitive and easy to use. For us, it's great. I've used Razor's Edge at other places. I think Razor's Edge, if you're a university or have a large staff, probably works pretty well, but for a small shop, Razor's Edge was just over the top, and you weren't using half of it, and it's expensive. And Carol, we actually had Salesforce come in and give us a presentation too. Love Salesforce, but again, a little cost prohibitive for us. So Bloomerang, the guy from Bloomerang came and did a presentation at an AFP meeting back maybe late last year. And that was the first time I had heard of it. And we were going to go a different direction, but when he made the presentation, we kind of reached out to them and decided to go with them. So it's worked out. So far, so good for us.
Yeah, I think it's a growing company.
Yeah, the company is wonderful, and they have great free resources and webinars. Almost every week they have at least 2, a lot about COVID messaging. And I've used Bloomerang in the past at a couple of organizations, and I really like it. But right now, especially with all of the different things happening in this environment, they have been putting on all kinds of free webinars. So definitely go to their website.
Yeah, and the webinars are excellent. And I also think I'm not a very tech savvy person. And so when you're trying to learn how to use it, they have a chat feature that they can walk you through step by step with representatives that are on the clock. And they have YouTube tutorials from their main site. So like I said, I'm not trying to hate on it. We love Bloomerang. It just, as you mentioned, Paul, it doesn't do all the things that big universities get from Razor's Edge that we're a little bit jealous of. But they're continuing to improve it. So we would recommend it for sure.
So I guess with that, since, I think all 3 of you have probably done a tremendous amount of research. So given unlimited funds and, the world is your oyster, what is the program that you would select over anything else? Paul?
From our recent research, I think probably Salesforce would have been the best choice for us, because that would, if we were but we would have to be a bigger shop, but that would have allowed us to grow and actually use it, and maybe even within some of our other programs to kind of connect things. With what we have and where we are, Bloomerang's working for us.
What was your least favorite that you would definitely stay away from?
Razor's Edge or eTapestry. They're just so difficult to navigate. There's nothing intuitive about them. Razor's Edge, they've just added piece by piece by piece onto that program, and it just doesn't function well. At least it didn't for me.
Great. Carol, unlimited money, what would you go with?
I'm happy with Salesforce, and I agree. Like Razor's Edge, I always was saying, that was like the Ferrari, and our shop didn't need it, and we didn't understand it. We didn't have anyone trained on it. and we pretty much needed a Chevy. But I think, but Salesforce is great in so many ways. And as I said, there is an opportunity to get free licenses for up to 10, and they have pro bono projects because they migrated all our data for free as a project as well. So it might not be as cost prohibitive, but as I said, I love Bloomerang in many ways.
What would you stay away from?
Oh, definitely Razor's Edge. I mean, I've even talked to people who are at like the big hospital and university foundations, which they do use it, but they said like it is, to get the reports I want, it's a job. So yeah.
What about you, Kevin?
I would stick with Bloomerang because it's the only one I know how to use. But I think that there is, if I had unlimited money and I could hire one of those people who knows how to use Razor's Edge really well, I think I'm told it's the best product out there, but I haven't used it. So I would lean on Paul and Carol since they've been in those systems and their expertise here. But right now I'm happy with what we got.
Happy with what you got. Is there anything you would stay away from?
No, we before we had this CRM, we were just putting everything in Enzweiler CX, which is not ideal.
I think a lot of people would share your sentiment on that aspect.
I do know that Enzweiler is putting out some new products regarding this, and so I haven't demoed them. They might be wonderful, but we weren't getting what we needed out of Enzweiler CX, and that's why we moved to a different CRM that was designed for philanthropic work. That's probably what I would say is, don't try to fit what you're needing to do into products just because your company or institution already has them. You have to advocate that you need a product that's designed to do development work and donor database work. It's just so much extra hassle to try to fit the square peg into the round hole. Anything I need my IT guy to explain to me in order to do my job is not a good setup, I don't think.
Stephanie, I will add one more thing if you're doing research on it, because I've experienced this before. When you're doing the research the company as far as its history. When I was at TCCH, we transitioned over to a platform called Donor Pro, which was great. We had great support. It was really intuitive. It worked well. And then they got bought out by another company. And then once that company bought them out, the online support just went in the toilet. I mean, it was great and went from great to not so great to not very good at all. So you just have to kind of be careful on, because a lot of these smaller companies get bought up by bigger companies, and then the support kind of goes away.
Yeah, definitely agree that there is a lot of research that goes into selecting what platform is going to work best for each organization. And there's a whole host of things that a lot of people don't think of, such as, the history of the organization or anything like that. Before we switch gears a little bit, just as a reminder, if anybody has any questions that they'd like to chat in, those go directly to Katie and she'll be able to monitor those. So, as we talked about in the beginning, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about COVID-19. And I think each of you has touched on some changes that you have made, but I'd like to get your thoughts as just from a development purpose, on how you're rethinking things. How are you rethinking development? How are you rethinking your asks? I think everybody's interested in possibly your opinion on the virtual events. I think everybody's maybe attended one, but I think it's a topic that is going to continue for quite some time. And what your just opinion is on that type of thing. So, kind of just an open platform on maybe some changes that you've had, or some thoughts, or some things that are not working right now that maybe you thought they would and they have in the past. But Kevin, you want to open it up?
Sure. We were really worried when everybody went remote and COVID happened that we would need to stop doing asks, right? And we don't even really call them that here. We used language about invitations, and I think that has been our biggest takeaway. People don't give money away because it benefits them financially, right? In most cases, people don't give money away because they feel like they have to, right? People primarily give to things that matter to them. and that they believe in, and it comes out of their heart, right? And so that didn't change during this time. And so if your messaging is appropriate and intentional and genuine, and I like underscore, triple highlight genuine messaging, we find that donors respond to that. We had 100 individuals give on Giving Tuesday Now last week, and we raised like $46,000 in one day. And it's in the middle of all this, craziness and uncertainty. I would share one quick story. We had a recent graduated in 2018, and I knew her from, she played Juliet and when we did Romeo and Juliet a couple years ago at the school. And so I knew she was a recent grad. I know that she works in retail and is likely laid off, and we got a $50 gift from her. So I found her number in our system, and I grabbed my phone, and I sent her a text, and I said, I just want you to know, I really appreciate this. And her response to me was, I wanted to give 100, but I've been laid off, so I only was able to give 50. I was just like, this is a 22-year-old laid off individual. And her response wasn't, how dare you ask me for money? It was, I wish I could have done more for my alma mater. And I just, I think that the genuine nature of your messaging will work out right now. So event specific fundraising has got to be really difficult, but individual invitations and cultivating those relationships. I think people really still care about the organizations. They're engaging with them in the appropriate and genuine ways right now.
Yeah, it's interesting that, the use of the word genuine and things like that, and it comes out in kind of our assumptions. So it's funny, I went back and read some articles from Philanthropy Now or Nonprofit News and Times about, the very early on articles about when everything, started to close and when everything started to, and you read those articles and the assumptions that were being made at that time, and how substantially different some of those assumptions are in the most recent articles. So I think it's, a big part of it, I think, is just being fluid in our assumptions and knowing that those could change at any time. Yeah. We're in a kind of a realm that we've never been in before. So it's, we're making assumptions based on just our gut feeling, which is difficult to navigate through. Carol, you touched on a lot of changes that Redwood is making so far. Any additions or thoughts?
Well, especially with the pandemic, my thought is that our missions really matter. All of our missions matter. And we might not be first responders, and we might not be the food pantries, and we might not be housing, but people really care about our missions. And like Kevin was saying, our donors give because they care about our mission, and our mission aligns with their values. And we are really, I always say, our goal in philanthropy, because I got away from development, which sounded too business oriented, philanthropy is the love of mankind or humankind. So we allow people to express their love of humankind through what we do in our mission. And those who are aligned with our mission, doesn't matter about the tax laws, it doesn't matter about, what's going on. They care about what happens to Redwood. So, we've actually, and I was talking to my steering committee, I said, we've actually gone over our annual fund goal, which is about 100,000. We're about at 120,000. I said, I almost didn't want to ask again but then, our whole agency, because, we're shut down, we're not getting our fee for service. They're probably going to face about $750,000 deficit as of June 30. It's the great reason why we have a foundation to help us, right? So, so our mission is, we're having our birthday tomorrow. So we did a Mother's Day mailing, and we said, we're honoring our founding mothers. For people who don't know, Redwood's name comes from our two founding families, the Readers and the Woods. And we talked about Sue Reader and Dorothy Wood and what they cared about with their children, who started our mission with 7 people. And we just tell the story about, for 67 years, the community has helped us, and we still need you to help us. And so we just kind of did a Mother's Day mailing honoring our mothers, and if you want to honor your mothers, and we just kind of blew it out. But people like to get something in the mail, because a lot of our donors, they've been celebrating, helping us for 60 years. And it's even hard. We have a board meeting tonight and half the people don't know how to do Zoom. You know, we're trying to explain to them. Some of our people are like, they don't know how to even get onto our Zoom, especially on our foundation board. So we're not moving any events to virtual. You know, we canceled our May event and we're doing other things. And then we're also, as I said, we started a fund at Horizon Community Funds last year, at GCF this year. And the reason that we can survive having 17 of our 20 programs shut down and over 700 clients not coming in, and we're not getting fee for service for that, is because we know we have the backup of our endowment to help us. And that's why we're focusing on the Kentucky and Dow tax credit, because people want us to survive. And so a lot of people who've given to our foundation in the past will want to give to us again. So we're just really focusing on people who care about our mission, and all of us on this call have missions that people love and care about and want to see here when COVID is over, because our missions matter. So that's our story for people.
Yeah, it's great. Paul, anything to add?
A couple things. We have kind of changed messaging a little bit because I think everybody, the only thing that's on their mind right now, and it's constantly being pushed out there, is COVID-19. So I think we have tried to primarily tried to show some care and concern for our donors. Like, how are you doing? Like, really, how are you doing? Because we know some donors have been affected more than others. We don't know what their situations are, but the COVID-19 thing is on everybody's mind all the time. So we're trying to show it's just donor-centric fundraising, but taking another step because of the circumstances that we're under. I think I saw Lisa Ratterman on the call. We just had a conversation about the virtual fundraising events recently. I think organizations that had their events coming up soon, that had to cancel but already had, maybe they had all their silent auction items already in place. I think those organizations probably will do okay with a virtual. I don't know, like for our event coming up in August, I don't know what that's going to look like as far as virtual, because, we did reach out to our business community for sponsorships, but we were very clear that we don't know if we were going to have the event or not. If you're able to help us this year, great. And it would be basically a sponsorship of the agency. Some businesses did come through with sponsorships. Some people said, hey, we can't do it this year, and we might not be able to do it again for a couple of years, given our, the current climate. So I think you just have to be mindful that it's a weird time and people are stressed, and you just have to have that kind of care concern for the donor while you're doing the ask. But don't stop asking.
Great. So, before I turn it over to Pat, I just kind of want to go through each of you and see if you have any last thoughts for everybody. Kevin, any final thoughts?
The title of the session being about, structuring your advancement department. I would just say that, in terms of building a staff and hiring a staff, measure twice, cut once, right? Before you hire somebody, really learn as much as you can about them and who they are and what matters to them. And I think Carol's point about, our missions matter. You have got to hire people that care about the mission of the organization. When you do that, you will find success. I am so blessed with a wonderful team here, but it's because we took the time to be very intentional about who we hired and what kinds of roles we put them in to maximize their strengths. And so I just think that's one piece of advice that I've learned in the last year that's helped us quite a bit.
Great, thank you. Carol?
So to follow that, we definitely, I've hired a couple, I think I've hired 3 people since I've been there. And because we serve children and adults with severe and multiple disabilities, some are nonverbal, it's really important to me to have my people that I'm looking at actually experience Redwood and be in the program areas. So, because they're going to be in the program areas because we do all the messaging, we engage our clients in so many ways. So just to really, because not everyone is cut out to be in that kind of environment, and that's fine. So just to be sure that everyone's comfortable with our mission and be able to you know, some days we have to, they were short-handed, we have to kind of help serve lunch. So yay, we can do that too. So just that. And my other thing is, everything's not an ask. So donor cultivation and retention. I always tell my team our donors are not ATM machines. So we really do need to call them and have a donor appreciation event and really have them come and engage and see their impact. So the way, especially now everyone's home, so you can call them. We have a lot of older donors. They love us to just call and check in on them. So find ways that you can be meaningfully engaged with your donor.
Great. Paul, last thoughts?
Fundraising is hard, and it's going to be probably harder. So I would encourage everybody out there to make sure they take care of themselves. Because if you don't take care of yourselves, you know, you're not going to take care of taking care of others. So take good care of yourself during these times and get the rest you need. And you know, when you're looking at that budget and you see what you need to raise next year, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to do that? Take a breath. It'll work out.
Great. Thank you. And before I throw it over to Pat, I just want to thank the three of you for chatting today. I think it was very beneficial, but thank you for taking the time, and we'll let Pat wrap things up.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie and Paul, Carol, and Kevin. I repeat what Stephanie said, that you're all great professionals. I know this was a scary time for many fundraisers and nonprofits when things started to come apart in mid-March, and you all have held it together, and you're all great professionals and all better people. We're so glad you're part of the CBC and we're a part of this program today. I also want to thank Katie and Stephanie and also Kyle Shoemate, the Von Lehman Marketing Director, who you didn't see today, but they are great partners of ours, and we are delighted and honored that we can work with them. I just wanted to remind you of a couple of upcoming virtual events. Everything's virtual, but it's starting to change soon, folks, so be ready for that. On May 21st, we'll have a webinar in partnership with the Northern Kentucky Health District. We'll be talking about phasing in the restaurants and getting those reopened. That'll be a week from Thursday, again, May 21st. And our first virtual luncheon will be the following Thursday, May 28th. We'll have Tim Schroeder with CTI. He'll be talking about the clinical trial process for finding a new vaccine for COVID-19. And I know there'll be a lot of people in on that. Thank you all for attending today. We had what is kind of typical of our turnout for these, and that's great to see that on a virtual basis. Thank you all for taking time to be a part of today. Again, thanks to our panel and Von Lehman. And with that, we will adjourn and wish you all well. Have a great day.